My name is Cloud. Today I'll be discussing my personal Ambisonic dome project. But first, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present. I live, work and study on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Around the middle of last year, I started a project aimed at producing a workable ambisonic dome that was achievable within the budget of a full-time student. I've had a lot of interest in the dome and its construction, so this talk will be split into two sections. I'll first discuss the nuts and bolts of the dome project, the hardware, the software I used to make the parts, and the audio and VR components. I'll then discuss my evaluation of the dome as a tool and my experiences in it. This started around the time of the first COVID lockdown. In order to pass the time, I purchased a very cheap 3D printer. It has been sold under a few names, the Duplicator i3, the Cocoon Design Touch, and was even sold at one point by Aldi. It was only $300 as a refurbished unit. I found online at Thingiverse.com some designs for a geodesic tent frame. This is what is known as a TV dome with 26 hubs. It is possible to buy pre-made hubs from places like eBay, but the cost of a hub kit is greater than the cost of the printer and all the materials. The consumables cost of 3D printing is very cheap. 3D printing your own hubs also has some powerful advantages. The most important for me was the ability to modify any part of the design that did not suit my purposes. I had originally intended to prototype the dome in PLA and reprint the parts using a much stronger material that is harder to print, ABS. It was never necessary. The PLA parts have seen some significant stresses and are holding up very well. The biggest disadvantage of 3D printing is the time it takes. The hubs were a 5-hour print each. There is a lot of free software available for 3D printing, and it is of varying usefulness. I'll just touch briefly on the packages that I used for the project. Tinkercad, a good, simple, in-browser shape editor. I can log into it from any machine and get my work done. I did most of the design work here. Matter Control, another simple editor that can also run your printer directly over USB. Unfortunately, it is almost unusable on Apple due to a bug that makes edits take hours to update. It's a real pity. For preparing the print jobs, I used Ultimaker Cura, free, simple and adequate for the job. Files from Cura could be copied to the SD card and printed directly from the printer without needing a computer attached. I'm leaving out the excellent Blender Cam. All of the advantages of Blender and all of the drawbacks of Blender with G-code generation built in. I've used it for CNC projects in the past. You can do anything, but if you're not already an expert, you can spend longer finding out how to do your job than actually doing it. For the purposes of this year's project, I added a virtual reality component to the dome. I chose to use the HTC Vive first generation. Mostly because it was one of the cheapest systems I could find, but also the problems surrounding Facebook's acquisition of Oculus make it very difficult to use or recommend Oculus equipment. I won't go into that now though. The Vive lighthouses, the outboard part of the motion tracking, can be mounted just about anywhere with camera clamps or tripods, making it very easy to work with. My second-hand Vive came with the wireless adapter, which I'm sure will be useful for performance purposes. The speakers in the dome had to be cheap. There are 26 of them. I used a component speaker from J-Car that is only $3.75 each in bulk. I wasn't expecting much, but I was pleasantly surprised. I had started making a tool in Max MSP to measure and correct all 26 speakers with an EQ, and I never used it. This plot is of a single speaker response. They do vary a bit from speaker to speaker. There is certainly room for improvement. I discovered that a chamber behind the speaker greatly improves the bass response. Implementing this, though, is a task for later, as it will take a long time to print. There's a single strange dip at 3K, which I'm not terribly bothered about. Overall, this array performs much better than expected. The low power handling of the speakers is not an issue due to the large number involved. The dome audio is handled by Max MSP. Max is free if you don't want to save anything you've edited or anything you've done. The dome installation is unlicensed, as I only need it for running pre-made patches. The Ambisonic calculations are courtesy of the ICST Ambisonics package. I'll discuss that later. It is also free. Steam VR runs the HTC Vive, also free. Vive integration is in the free Mac MSP libraries. Well, is the dome low cost? The total cost of printing all the parts is $57.57. All the struts and legs are electrical conduit straight from Bunnings, as are the pipe clips. Hook-up wire and bolts add up in large numbers, but the total cost of the structure and speakers is $397. Now it starts getting expensive. A lot of these items are really things that you could source from friends and borrow. The old computers and old VR headsets I'm using are gaming technology that has been left behind, and in the case of the first generation Vive, was unpleasant to use due to the low resolution. Getting 26 channels of audio out of a computer, however, is not cheap. The best I could do was to find some old Firewire technology. This gear is being abandoned at a rapid rate and prices are dropping very fast. By combining an old Sapphire with a pair of very obsolete ADAT recorders, I was able to get the electronics cost total down to $1,246. But seriously, you should be borrowing this gear if you can. Add in the Vive and it's $2,046 all up. So here's the total cost of purchasing everything. $1,585 without the VR component and $2,385 with. It's cheap. It's less than the cost of a single speaker in a professional array. But does it work?